Go recording. Hey!
Hey, welcome!
Welcome to Brainwaves with Karen Taylor and Dr. Robin Barr. Robin is the linguist in residence at American University. She is also an instructor at the Washington English Center and the Washington Literacy Center in tandem as a dyslexia interventionist. And so we have a lot going on in Robin's brain. She's a brain expert, brain in the language. I'm going to keep talking about her in the third person until she's poking me.
I have nothing to say.
Okay, all right. She'll stop talking about, I'll stop talking about her and let her speak.
I love brains. Brains are great.
So the show is Brainwaves. It is a call-in show or a write-in show or a chat show, but we have a theme for each time we meet. And so this time we're really diving into R. Are you happy?
We just finished a Talk Like a Pirate Day, and I actually know why pirates say R.
Why do pirates say R?
Pirates say R because they come from the West Country, where of England, where they did not lose the R.
Okay.
And so if you're from Bristol or that area, you still pronounce the R's, and that's what the pirates did.
Who knew?
And so they say "uar" for yes in Devon.
I didn't even think pirates were real. Those kind of pirates. I only knew about sort of modern day pirates who.
I think the stereotype comes mainly from Treasure Island, where what was his name? Long John Silver was played by a fellow from Bristol, I think, Robert Newton, famous actor, and that's what he did. He would go "R" as part of his shtick. Yeah, and but there were a lot of pirates in the Bristol Channel, and that's where a lot of the sailing came from, and that's where a lot of the seafaring lingo came from. So that's why pirates say R.
And who else says R?
See,
this is the show where I get to throw questions at Robin, and she gets to reply.
What's the name of that really weird? I don't want to call them a rock group. The
Ramones.
The Wurzels.
Okay.
They also are from the West Country, and they had a famous hit. I can't believe it was a hit, but it was based on I got a brand new roller skate, and you've got the key. You remember that? So instead, it's I've got a brand new combine harvester, and I'll share that with you. And then the chorus is "ooh-ar, ooh-ar, ooh-ar." So they're making fun of their own accents. But you can find it on YouTube, and it's hysterical. They've got it's like a jug band, and they're on tractors, and they have it looks like hayseeds, except they're in England.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm going to add my story to that from an English teaching context, since a lot of us are English teachers. When I was living in Namibia, we'll try to share the screen. We're going to get really cozy here, Robin.
Okay.
Robin. See, it's so fitting that Robin's going to talk about R control. She's Robin Barr. But when I was living in Namibia, I taught these large classrooms all morning and then all afternoon. And so we'd take these breaks into the courtyard, and my students, who were young adults, would go out into the courtyard, and the men would go off and talk, and the women would sit down and braid each other's hair in these circles, groups, and one person working on another person's hair. And the break was about a half hour, so it was a good amount of time to get this kind of work done, or at least along the way. It was a long process. And so I would come down during the break, and one time I came down, and I realized I had caught them imitating me. Yeah. And I was the American teacher. They'd always had British teachers or South African teachers, other teachers of English. And so they were imitating me, and I knew they were imitating me because of their guilty look up at me when I stopped by. But what they were doing in imitating me was rah, 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 rah. And so they were imitating my American rah.
And actually, that's a really good technique for helping your students learn the pronunciation of the American R, because if they can do it enough to make fun of you, then they can do it enough to use it actually in speech.
Yeah, and I didn't know that at the time, so I didn't think to harness it.
Or another way to do it, and both of these ways get around the blockage of the brain.
Well, that's my question: is how were they able to imitate me when they were having fun, and yet when we would go in the classroom, their accent was a different
thing. Exactly. It's all about what's going on in the brain. So if you all may know that the language area of the brain is on the left side, Broca's area, and right about I don't know if you can see me, right about there.
Right there.
So the left it's left frontal lobe near the fissure here. And this is the part that stores all of the rules for your native language. And so when you're using language, it takes over. And what it says goes. It suppresses all kinds of information that's not relevant to your own language. So if in your own language you don't distinguish an R from an L, for example, if in Japanese or Korean or even some dialects of Chinese, you have rules for when you say an R and when you say an L, that's going to take over and keep you from making a difference between rake and lake, say. So, but in English, we never lost the distinction between rake and lake. And newborns can easily hear the difference between rake and lake, and they've done studies on 4-day-old infants that shows that, yes, they can distinguish rake from lake from birth. And what's happening is not that you're learning to distinguish them in English, but rather you're learning not to distinguish them in languages like Japanese or Korean.
Isn't that called pruning?
Possibly.
Isn't there some pruning going on there?
There's a lot of pruning that goes on at 1-year-old and also at puberty. So also myelinization.
Yep.
Okay. And so
I like the fancy words, even when I'm not quite sure what they mean.
Yeah, so putting a sheath of myelin around the nerves.
Yep.
Okay. It's like putting insulation on an electrical wire. Okay. What's interesting about that is that that's one reason why learning a language to sound native at it after puberty is so difficult, because that's one of the cutoff points for when the brain reorganizes itself, and it's hard to come back from that. That's why, at least for native-like pronunciation, I think you can really talk about a critical period for language acquisition. Yeah. There are people who can learn the pronunciations past that point, but I can argue that they're using a different part of their brain, at least to jumpstart the process. So what your students were doing in Namibia is they were imitating you, just like an impressionist would. If somebody who imitates Trump or or some other celebrity imitates Alan Rickman, whatever.
Yeah.
They are probably not making up their sentences as they go along. They probably have a prefab sentence that they use with all the appropriate pronunciations to make it sound like that person.
That's right.
And that means they're using probably the right side of their brain. So the part of the brain right here, almost opposite Broca's area, this part of the brain does music, and it does, on the right side of the brain, does music and environmental sounds, song, imitation, anything that it doesn't perceive as language can be processed on the right side of the brain. But if it starts suspecting that it's doing language, it'll say, oh, not my job. I work to union rules. I'm not allowed to perceive this. I'm sending this over to the left side of the brain.
So what do you say of, Robin, of these videos, these very talented people who are able to put out a video with them? I think Amy, my name is Amy Fisher. I think she says her name is. And then she says it in the English accent, and then she says it in a Scottish, and then she says it in Arkansas. And how is she suppressing the language part of her brain, and what is she doing when somebody can speak in 30 different accents pretty effectively?
Yeah, I mean, she might be. The question is, can she continue a conversation in that particular accent? Are there particular phrases that she has mastered as chunks? It might be that she's very good at code switching. Maybe she controls all of those languages as in a native-like manner. The more languages you learn as a child, the more you can learn the easier it is to accumulate those.
So we're going to use this to get back into R.
R.
So purple shirt is the sound.
One more thing. One thing that I have my students do, environmental sounds, right?
Yep.
I have my students pretend they're angry dogs.
Yes.
They can do that just fine.
And then they harness that. And
what you have to do at that point is say, okay, what are you doing with your mouth? Not what does it sound like?
Yeah.
But what are you doing to make that sound? Where is your tongue? Where are the lips?
Yeah.
How do you do that sound?
And then repurpose it.
Yeah.
I like that. So on the topic of my first question, and please type in. You have a chat feature here in this interface, so you can type in your questions.
Who's this?
We have looks like Debbie's with us too. Welcome, Debbie. R, vowel, consonant, or both?
Ooh.
That's my first question.
Yeah. It is both, but not at the same time.
Okay. Glad to hear that. So elaborate on that.
Think about Y and I. So I'm sorry, the Y sound and the E sound.
Okay. Yes.
So if you say E, it's the center of the syllable. It's a vowel, E. So beat, right? Mm-hmm. But if you put vowels next to it, you'd say tire, or mayonnaise.
Okay.
But it's still mayonnaise. Mm-hmm. It's as if you had an I in the middle there, except it's no longer the middle of the syllable.
Right.
W works the same way. U and W work the same way. Mm-hmm. So if your students are having a hard time with W, like I have a Thai student right now for whom for whom quick comes out as thick.
Uh-huh.
Okay? Somehow the quick. So saying the W too fast doesn't work for her. So I said, okay, for you, you're going to have to start out with two syllables, quick.
Right.
Quick. And then when you speed it up, that works.
Okay.
Right?
Yep. Resyllabification.
Yeah.
It's a great strategy.
Yeah. Works for S too.
Yep.
Like
school.
School can turn into school.
Right. We love that one. So resyllabification.
Resyllabification. Yeah.
All right.
So what we can do, the same thing that happens with Y, I, and W, U, also happens with L and R. So L and R, when they're not being consonants at the edge of a syllable, mm-hmm. can be the nucleus of the syllable. So if you say bird, where is the vowel? You have a B on one side, you have a D on the other side, so here's the B, here's the D. What's that in the middle? But if you look at the way it's spelled, it looks like IR. So
beard.
Isn't I the vowel? Beard. But or even bird, you might see schwa R in some transcriptions. But if you think of the way an American would ordinarily say that word, you're going directly from the B to the R. Mm-hmm. There's nothing in between.
Right.
Your tongue is in fact already in the position for the
So
R.
Either we argue that there's no vowel, or we say R is the vowel.
Yeah, and you can't have a syllable without a vowel.
Exactly. So that's where I always kind of come back to.
So now R is a vowel and it's a consonant. So
yes.
Purple shirt. This is R, the vowel.
Yes, purple shirt is the vowel, the vocalic R, as we call it. Okay, good. So vowel consonant. Now my next question, and again, the chat's here. You can always type in. But my next question is R, around the world. So what's the deal with R? American R is often a vowel, sometimes a consonant. So rural would be, a tricky word where it begins with a consonant R and it has a vowel R and then it changes back to another consonant R for the second syllable. Yeah. Rural. But what about R in other languages? Like I think when I do vowel yoga, I talk about, here's R,
don't touch,
and then So how is it that this one grapheme around the world represents these different behaviors?
Well, it's not the same grapheme. You don't necessarily. In European countries, it is.
Right, the ones that use Roman alphabet, let's say.
Okay. For example, in French, you have the uvular R, or sometimes it turns into a velar fricative, but it's the, when you're gargling, it's the little thing that hangs down in the back of your throat, and you can go, or if you can't, if you have a cold
or
whatever.
Let's do that again. Ready? Okay.
If you can't do that, then it turns into a sound, which is a velar fricative of some kind. Mm-hmm. But that's where most of France will make theirs. in the south of France, you might get the tongue tip R like in Spain. So, and the trilled one, so single R and double R, or short and long R.
Is it fair to say that most other R's touch and are consonantal?
I would say so. I think
because I think I've been saying that for quite some time in my training.
I think that's legitimate.
So I want to test that.
If you look at some of the Slavic languages, you might, like Czech, for example, you might get R's that are fricatives, like je, like dvorzak, je, je. So that's sort of half R, half j, half fricative, and it touches, but not where you think, where you expect. Okay. But yeah, I think that our approximate sound is fairly rare in the world's languages, which is one reason it's so hard for people to learn it. And it's also very hard to learn because the descriptions in the books are really hard to understand, because it's all happening inside your mouth, and you don't really have control over what your tongue is doing.
Well, let me show a couple pictures. We were just looking through some of my favorite, I have, a collection of my favorite pronunciation books. And these are just a few from different books. I won't be mentioning titles, but I like the books that I have. But this is, let me go backward for a minute here. Let's go back to the first slide, go back in time. So this is from an older book that does a contrast, in this case, between d and but I think this kind of approach has been around for quite some time, of drawing a side view of what's supposed to be happening. What do you think of that kind of approach?
I think it's a really helpful approach in that it changes perceiving the sound from your ears, which will automatically go to the Broca's area, and then say, okay, I'm not going to pay any attention to the distinctions here between R and L. It helps you access that information through a different channel. So here you're accessing it visually. And now the problem here is you're looking at this picture and you're saying, okay, how do I make my tongue do that? So you see, can the watchers see what's happening here? So
they can see us and they can see.
Okay, so you look at the one on the left. You say, okay, I can do that. I can put my tongue, the tip of my tongue, at the alveolar ridge. That's the bump behind your teeth, and it could be a d, and it could be a l, it could be a n. You're not sure what it is, but you're touching the tip. Now look at the one on the right. It looks like it's almost in the same place, but it's kind of humpy and it's not touching.
I could find myself getting really concerned about how to make that this
that little disc,
this thing right here.
Yeah. How do you do that? I don't know.
Yeah, that's rough.
So how do you, how can you, without actually taking x-rays of what your mouth is doing at the time, how can you make your tongue approximate that?
Right.
I know when we work on vowels and how you make your tongue go front and back, we use lollipops, or I use spoons in my class.
See, and I think this all by itself is sort of proof of how vowel-like our R is, right? The more classic consonants, it's fairly easy to show or describe how to. Am I getting off on the wrong tangent here? I think the fact that it's so hard, like when I start thinking, how do I round my tongue like that? That's the whole thing, is I'm trying to shape space inside my mouth.
That's actually very significant, because even for it sounds like s and sh, you're not actually touching the part that's important. And in fact, there are different ways of pronouncing the sh as well, and that's hard to do. But at least there, you're not doing anything too peculiar with the shape of the tongue. What's weird about R is that it's called a grooved sound. Yes, exactly. I can't do that. Can you roll your tongue like that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. Yeah.
We have another person in the audience over here. No,
can't do that.
No.
But
that's genetic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what you want to do is do that to the part of your tongue that's behind the tip.
Well, that's sort of what I think over here. We'll come back to that one right here. So in this is from I'll say it's from Clear Speech. It's a really beautiful drawing with Judy Gilbert and her artists. And you liked this one, Rob, and talk to us about that.
Well, it's accurate. I mean, look at here we have the R on the left. You see that the tip of the tongue is approaching the alveolar ridge, but it's not touching it. and then there's a dip. There's a funny little dip there. But in fact, that dip is not visible in cross-section. Or if you were looking at the side of my mouth, you would not see that dip.
It's actually this way.
Yes.
Yeah, it's from the front, but they're putting it in to convey.
So what your tongue is doing is this.
Yeah.
There's like a little hole down the middle.
It's like hills in a valley.
Yeah,
rather
exactly.
Than,
So audience, make your mouth do an sound. What part of your mouth is the tongue touching? The side of your teeth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the teeth on each side. That's this part on the edge. I don't know if you can
right
point.
Here. Yeah, this part.
So that part is touching the teeth, and then the middle is kind of hollowed out, and that's what makes the weird R color.
Ah. Okay.
R. Yeah. Or air. You can feel it infecting the vowel even as the vowel is going by.
Those are formants doing their work.
Yeah, that's weird stuff. And what's difficult here is there are all kinds of ways of describing it. So you've got move your tongue tip up.
Yeah. So here, this is from a book.
Tongue.
Yeah, this is from a book that takes an approach that's descriptive mostly. I mean, there's a picture here too.
Yeah.
Of nothing touching anything, basically. And that's often how I get at it too, because I think of the back of your tongue is definitely, it's attached to something back there. Yeah. I don't really know.
And maybe the teeth are touching some.
And the teeth are touching because otherwise you'd be doing a lot of work to play keep away or don't touch what's the game the kids play?
Yeah.
Don't touch the sides of your mouth. That'd be really hard. You kind of keep everything really tight all the time and don't touch your teeth. And so this is a picture that kind of conveys that idea that it's out there in space. But this is an example of a book that would take a descriptive approach. Raise the tip of your tongue. My difficulty with something like this is just the more you describe it, the less students can do it.
It's really hard. It's very difficult to translate the instructions into actual muscle movement. It's like if somebody's telling you how to play a sport, if they're saying, okay, move your latissimus dorsi this way, and then contract the triceps, and then say, I don't have that kind of control over my muscles, and nobody has control.
And then finally somebody walks over and moves your body for you. So it's
and in fact that's kind of what you need, except it's you can't reach into your students' mouths and poke at them.
Oh, believe me, I've tried. It makes them nervous, to say the least.
I would think so. Yeah.
So and then there was this one. This is another book. Which just visually had me focusing. And again, we're all trying, all of us who design materials and give instruction, we're all trying. And books do their very best to convey what we can do. And yet that just looks to me like I'm about to, spit or, something's marvelous is about to come out of my mouth.
But again, notice on the left, you've got that little groove.
Oh, there's the groove.
Yeah. And on the right, that's the L, which is number one touching, but is also open on the sides. There's I don't know if you can see the little diagram on top there. So the air is coming out on both sides, which is not, so it's the sort of the opposite of the.
One little trick I want to stop. This is my symbol for, let's take a break for a second. Participants, please know, I think you can click on either our picture or the other image to switch which one is the largest. So if you want to take a moment to play with that, just click around on your screen and you may find that you're able to look at something more closely than you were before that you wanted. Okay, great. My other question here is about so often there's this contrast between R and L, and yet there's no mention of dark L. Always that kind of L.
Oh, that is such a difficult one too, because a lot of my students, again, they are hearing the wrong part of the L. So for an L, most dialects of American English will be touching the roof of the tip of the tongue will be touching the roof of the mouth at the alveolar ridge, right? Some dialects don't do that, but for the dark L, so if you're saying leaf and light, leaf and let and
light, leaf,
light not so much. But as soon as you say look or lots or loaf, the back of your tongue starts to hump up as if you're saying oh, right? So it's connected with the following vowel, and especially if the L is after the sound, even if you're saying feel, feel, you're not saying feel, you're not saying Feel. Okay, so
feel.
It's as if you have an extra vowel there. So I have a student right now who cannot spell his name. His name is Monkol, and he spells it M-O-N-G-K-O, ow.
Ow?
Ow. I said, there's no letter ow. So he's trying to say L, but what he's perceiving is a vowel as a dark L, and he's perceiving ow, and that's how he's producing the name of the letter L.
That is very much, that reminds me of my son writing this for more. M-L-R. He wrote, one of his earliest notes to me was more milk, and it was M-L-R and then M-L-K.
Yeah.
More milk.
And in fact, we were just talking about Bristol. You know, Bristol is spelled with an L at the end, but one of the characteristics of the Bristol dialect is changing that L and removing the tip of the tongue and just changing that L into a W. So in fact, the original
Bristol.
The original name of the city of Bristol with an L was Bristow, and the speakers of the Bristow dialect couldn't tell, is that an L or a W? I don't know.
Yeah.
So they stuck in an L. And my niece, who grew up in Baltimore area, Annapolis, she has L insertion in words like drawing turns into drawling.
So my children are doing this.
Oh, see, this is the Maryland thing.
And I'm not from Maryland, so it's very interesting to watch.
If you were from Boston, they would be saying
crown and drawing.
Drawing.
But we digress.
Okay,
we're excited. I know. I'm the one who's like, we're digressing. So our around the world, we've kind of gotten into the. I'd like to find out what you are doing with these drawings.
Okay,
The drawings. Sorry, the drawings.
So I was saying before, so look at this. Here we have what your lips are doing when you're saying R. So they're saying, when you're saying R, you have to purse your lips. I would love to take a poll of listeners here. How many of you cannot smile while you're saying a word like right? Or red.
Right.
Is there a way to find out from them?
No, I'd have to set up a poll that I don't have available right now.
Raise your hand.
But we can certainly, here, let's take this out for a minute and stop sharing. I want to see where we are. Let's look at our chat and see, can you smile and say reading? Read. Can you smile and say read? Fear. Or is that, does that feel really uncomfortable?
Read.
Type in if you have a thought about that. Read. Meaning, what is the real question here, Robin? You're asking them whether...
Don't move your lips. Do you have to say read? Or can you say read?
And maybe we're not asking can, we're asking do.
Oh, I want both.
Okay, all right. So
because if it's part of your dialect, you can't undo it, or it's difficult to undo it.
In other words, some of us produce the R sound with the lips more than with tongue, although the tongue and the lips are both involved. And then others of us are more dedicated to the positioning of the tongue than the lips, let's say. Is that?
Well, you don't have to move your lips when you say R.
Right. Read.
So those of you who have to round your mouth when you say read, that may be actually that might be a carryover from the Old English WR. That's why a lot of our words are spelled with WR. So read. Sorry, right, wrong. Right, wrong.
That was wrong.
Yeah,
right and wrong.
Reek. Yes. So the rounded W. I'm not getting anybody answering. Aha!
There we go. Hard for you. So Debbie, it's hard for you to say read or ready with a smile, right?
Ready.
Right. Correct. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So, and Debbie, if I remember, Debbie, aren't you from the East? I kind of know who you, Aren't you from the East? Pretty sure. You're from New York, I think.
Kristen is also from New York, but upstate, I think.
Ooh, Debbie's not. Okay, remind me. But all of this does come down to, the profile of speech that you've inherited from your environment and your family speech, right? All of
but
these
I think
things
also
that are your dialect.
this is idiosyncratic. So it's possible that people from the same dialect may have different ways of producing the same sound, because there are two ways of producing the same formants, the same acoustics in English. It's true that in New England, you're more likely to get the rounded R. And these are the people who, as children, are likely to ba ba wah wah, you know, say white and Western New York City. Yeah, so that's where Kristen's from. But if you're from, if it's possible for you to use the non-rounded R, then it's an easier one to teach your students. So the R that in all these books they're trying to teach everybody is kind of a mixture of the two. They're focusing a lot on what your lips are doing and not paying a lot of attention to what the tongue is doing and how to make the tongue do that. So I'd like to actually go to the board here.
Let's go to the board, and I'm going to go get a color vowel chart because then I have questions after that. Okay. So I'm going to let Robin draw for you for a little bit here, and we'll play with, there we go.
Okay, I don't know if you can see the board.
We can see the board pretty well, and we may not see Robin too well, but go for it, Robin.
Okay, can you see this part of the board? Okay, so I'm going to draw the tongue. I'll pick red. I'll draw the tongue in red. So the R that you were seeing in the books is, it looks like it's aiming at this alveolar ridge and is kind of curled back and then bunches up again like that, okay? You think, well, how do I do that, right? And one thing that I do with my students is I say, try curling it further back, because if you curl it further back, you don't need to round the lips as much. So more retroflex.
So that's the tip.
Yeah, this is the tip of the tongue. And you're curling it. Imagine this is your tongue flat here.
Oh,
like
here.
This.
I'm gonna be this.
See? Okay.
R.
And this is the motion I use to teach my students. R. And the issue here is when you have a mirror in front of you and you say, okay, curl your tongue back. A lot of the students get closer so they can see you. A lot of the students will try leaving your mouth open like this while you curl your tongue back.
Oh.
Yeah, see, it's not an R yet.
Oh.
Yeah, that's something very weird. Yeah.
R.
So I've got some students who are doing
Oh. And yeah, it's very uncomfortable
but if you close your mouth,
R.
Once you've gotten the retroflex going on, then it turns directly into
So I'm going to do it this way. R. R. Yeah, it does.
So if you look at this picture, if your mouth was this far open, it would be some kind of weird thing like that. So let's close the mouth further. And what you get is this amount of space in front of the tongue, okay? And that creates an R sound. Now, let's look at the other picture. I don't know if you can see the other picture. I got two of them. It's kind of shiny. Okay, there. What the other half of the Americans do for the American R is something that looks more like this, bunched up at the palate, but with the tip down. So if you say R like this, R, R, if you try doing it with smiling, like those of you who said you can't do it with, without rounding your lips, what does it sound like when you smile? It's just some kind of vowel. Okay, so here's just some kind of vowel, and you can tell, well, that makes sense because you've got the hump right here where a back vowel would be. It's just you're not rounding your lips. But if you only have this much space in front of your tongue to make the I don't know what to call it, the vibrating space. Okay, so you've got something that's this big versus something that's this big with the other diagram. So what you have to do with this shaped tongue, if you don't have the tip of your tongue pulled back far enough, then you have to make this space larger so you've got the same dimensions in front of your tongue as you did in the other in the other mouth. So the shape of the acoustic space is the same, or the size is the same, so it's going to produce the same sound acoustically, or But when you try to produce this one, you have to extend your mouth further in order to give more space, so it's not just it has to be But you can also see why it is that children, when they hear might miss this little tongue humping thing and just say
Yeah. I'm wetty.
Yeah, I'm wetty.
Yeah, I am wetty. So then what about the chart? What does the chart really offer that none of this has so far? I mean, as far as drawings and descriptions. And I'm thinking here about
I'll tell you how I do the vowel yoga. So we talked about vowel yoga last time, I think. I use this all the time in my classes. Actually, you're facing the right way for this, but for the front vowels, you put your hands in front and go all the way up to the top. And then down here at olive, it's and then when you go up to cup of mustard, olive sock, cup of mustard, and you can see my jaw closing, But now when I get to R,
So this is just a kind of, let me describe what Robin and I have been doing recently. Robin has been teaching a course at the Washington Literacy Center and Washington English Center. Those are two separate organizations who are partnering with us.
And with ELTS.
With English Language Training Solutions and the Color Vowel Chart to provide an effective intervention for English learning adults who have failed to thrive in their lowest level English classes. They've studied and tried, and they're not making progress. And so this is an attempt to see, do they have language-based learning disabilities that are like dyslexia? And so Robin has been really working with the chart and trying new things. And so this, when I sort of created this vowel yoga for the first time in about 2010, and there's a video out there on YouTube, and it's younger me and all that stuff, but it's not written in stone as far as exactly what the hand has to look like. And so in that video, I do something along the lines of this.
Which is this
R,
one. That's this one right here.
That's this one right here. R, And that is pure coincidence, by the way.
But that's how you say R, right?
Yeah, it is. So I guess.
But your tongue tip is down, right?
Yeah.
R. Okay. So when I say R, my tongue tip is up. But it's very hard to teach the tongue tip down one because you've got to get that little bump in the tongue and you've got to groove it this way. And
so the way I did it happened to mirror the way I do it.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
And I did not really know that in all, honesty, but I'm lucky. So R for me works. However, for Robin, and possibly for students in general, it might be easier to come up this way.
Well, I find it easier to describe not just in terms of giving them instructions, but also visually.
R.
Because trying to go R, but the little bit of groove in the middle, and So,
but I think the point is that you can be doing it, I think, either way.
You can, and you can produce your R either way.
Right.
I just find it easier to see the curling back of the tongue.
Yeah.
In a mirror.
And it's been fun to watch her do this. I've been observing her. The other key point, so one is you can do it either way. There's, I think, some advantage to doing it this way. But
just for clarity.
Yeah, the other big piece, though, is, I don't know if you caught that there are two things that we're doing with these. One is Robin was saying, as distinct sounds with glottal stops separating, and then I came through and I went through the continuum, the and I think that needs to be done. Those two need to complement each other to remind the student and the teacher that these are not fixed boundaries. It's not like you have to be 32 degrees north and 54 degrees, west or whatever.
And that's why it's so frustrating, because the student doesn't know at what point the becomes because to them it may be the same phoneme, it may be the same sound.
As it often is.
They don't know how far is far enough.
Yeah. But this idea of levering, that I have my lever here. Here's my lever. Here's Hold on, we have to be here. When does it change to mustard? And then when could I get up to You can start to have students do hand raising activities where, you're the one who is you have the lever because you're the native speaker or the model speaker, and a student is moving your arm up and down, and the other students are making judgment calls about when it has changed from, say, olive to mustard.
But what I do is I don't rely on the auditory input yet, because when I ask my students, okay, what sound is this? I say, look at my mouth.
Exactly.
Don't listen to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So watch my mouth. Is this ah or Is this olive sock or cup of mustard? And I'll say caught, cut.
And then they know.
Then they can see.
Yeah. So then you can do the lever without any noise at all. Just here. So then somebody's going to touch, take my lever. And they can start saying, oh, there's the olive, here's the mustard, and so forth.
And in fact, that's how I give them feedback, instead of correcting them by saying, just do this. And they'll know.
Yes, I'd love to get that video footage together. Some beautiful footage of her students reminding themselves, here's ah, or they do this.
Yeah, it's an elephant, yeah.
Yeah. So, but why, Robin, remind us, why are these arm motions? Why is this not just silliness?
This is much better than, because remember, when your perceptive parts of your brain know that it's language, it says, okay, not my job, goes right over to Broca's area, which has your first language rules, right? And if you
their original rules,
the
deep rules, the automatic rules of phonology,
the unconscious rules,
not
right?
Spelling rules or the stuff that we can recite. This
just
is the stuff
the rules of pronunciation. How do you say things?
Just being clear.
How do you articulate things? Yeah. And if you want to get past that, if you want to be able to actually hear the difference between ah and which is very easy to do if you're using the right side of your brain, even if you are a speaker of a language that doesn't distinguish those two. If you had those two sounds and you removed the language parts from the signal, then it would be so easy to hear the switch. But for somebody for whom these are the same phonemes, they have no way of knowing where the split is. Right. And in fact, it's pretty arbitrary to them. So what they need to be able to do is put their mouths in the correct position first. And it seems that with enough training in how to make the sound and produce the sound yourself, suddenly you start to perceive it as different. And I would like to see more experimentation done on that. So there have been a few studies showing that production seems to precede perception. So the mouth teaches the ear, in effect. Yeah. I don't know, I haven't seen enough done on that, and I would like to see more. Yeah. More actual.
I'll share an anecdote to kind of make that a practical insight, and I think this is a good illustration of that. I was visiting a classroom in New Mexico of adult learners with a colleague of mine, and there was a woman in the room in her 40s who had had a stroke the previous year. She was from Syria. And that happened to be the day I was there to watch the teacher who's color vowel trained. But she was in the second or third week of class and hadn't had a chance to get into vowel yoga yet. And so she had reviewed the color vowel chart, and a lot of the students already knew it, but this woman hadn't ever done yoga before. And so the teacher went through yoga, and at the end of that class, that student walked up to her and said, I was just able to make the sound that I've not been able to make since the stroke.
Wow.
And at that point, the teacher stopped everything, took the student over to me, and I recorded it, but her speech, it's still problematic. So it's not, I don't have a good capture of, and her English is limited too. Yeah. But she definitely was able to express, she was amazed. And it was because the arm taught the mouth.
Yeah, so you have much more control over your arms, and you can see what's happening much better than you can figure out what's going on inside your mouth. That's why we, use lollipops and other tricks. But, a lot of people do not have very much conscious control over their tongues, right? Yeah. But I'm also going to be teaching a class at Washington Literacy Center for people who are having speech therapy. So I'm doing a reading class with them, and I'm going to include a whole lot of vowel yoga. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the speech therapists, they're from George Washington University. They're going to be sitting in on the class to see, how it is that I am showing the position of the tongue, because that's a hard thing. You know, people, speech therapists use tongue depressors and mirrors and all kinds of things to do that. But this is a really useful technique, I think, once you get the metaphor.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we have a few minutes left, and I'd like to take some time for questions.
Okay, Debbie had to leave.
Yeah, Debbie had to go. But we still have a few people in the room. And what are you doing with R control and the purple sound? And you know what I realized when I just said R control is we haven't at all gotten into how we use the hand to teach So for a word like far can be hard to take apart and understand what's happening.
Yeah. So you have fa, r.
So with the hand, when I'm using like harbor, right? So there's harbor with the open hand on the stress. Harbor. So har. I try, and then sometimes I need to break it down. We go really slow. Har. Just to separate out. Then I can stop before the R comes. Ha, ha, ah. I say, okay, that's an olive word that moves har to purple. So that's, I mean, I'm not here to teach that today, but I just wanted to kind of mention that is mentioned in the webinar that I just did recently.
Last week.
Yeah. And so if you own the color vowel approach, when you buy the teacher starter kit or you buy the fully equipped classroom, you get the color vowel approach, and that's your key to seeing all these videos live. And the recorded versions are in YouTube under the color vowel chart. So you can take a look at that, and we'll post it again in our community. Okay. Questions. We have just a few minutes. Questions or comments. This would be a great time since a couple people are left. If you want to tell us what you're doing with R control. I'll use the whites on
I mean, I have lots more I can say.
Sure, but actually I know what she can say, and it's deeper than for 3 minutes or 2 minutes. So we might leave it at that, I think next
no questions
month, that's okay. We're not going to, I want to have all these R words ready. I don't want to guilt them into question asking, but if you do have them, you can always ask them over in my Color Vowel community. So if you're listening to this as a recorded webinar, recorded webcast, go ahead and post your questions over there in the community. I'll just make it clear again, we have a public Facebook page, and then we have the private community, and so you can post in either place. This video will
and I will see it, and I will answer.
That's right. Robin will be answering those questions
at length. Yeah,
that's right.
And so a lot of times I get all kinds of ideas from this.
Yeah,
I'm going to leave you with one mystery. Why is the nickname for Richard, has it changed over the years? It used to be Hitch, as in Hitchcock or Hitchens. Ooh. Used to be Dick, as in Dickon. And now it's Rick. So see if you can figure out that. The nickname tells you how the pronunciation of R has changed in English over the last few years.
So say it again.
Last 100 years. Yeah. So the nickname from, say, the Middle Ages was Hitch. The nickname from the 17th century was Dick, and the nickname from the modern era is Rick. So why?
or how do those three pronunciations illustrate pronunciation shifts
of the letter R,
the sound R?
Yeah, in English. So
okay.
you can go back in time.
I feel like we're going to become an NPR show, because you're going to put out like a little teaser at the end of each show.
That's your.
So when we return next month for Brainwaves, Robin will address that question.
Okay, remind me.
I'll remind you.
Remind me.
Remind Robin. Okay. Great, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. This is Brainwaves. This is our monthly webcast with Dr. Robin Barr from American University, linguist in residence, and just phenomenal linguist in general. I'm Karen Taylor from English Language Training Solutions and the Color Vowel Chart. We'll join you and join us next month. Take care. Thanks.